My name is Marcus. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a night dispatcher for the County Highway Department in northern Vermont. It's not the most exciting job in the world, but during the winter months, it's essential. My shift runs from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and my main responsibility is coordinating our snowplow drivers during storms and making sure all the routes get cleared. This happened 3 weeks ago during what they're calling the worst blizzard Vermont has seen in over 50 years. The storm hit us hard on a Wednesday night. By 10 p.m., we already had over 8 inches on the ground, and the National Weather Service was predicting another 2 feet before morning. Every single one of our plows was out that night. I was in the dispatch office alone, monitoring radio traffic and GPS trackers for all 12 trucks. Around midnight, I got a call from Dale, one of our most experienced drivers. Dale had been plowing county roads for almost 20 years. He knew every back road, every dangerous curve, every spot that drifted shut first. If anyone could handle a storm like this, it was Dale. He radioed in saying he was heading up Route 14 north toward the mountain pass. It's a stretch of road that's pretty isolated, mostly farmland and woods, very few houses out that way. I told him to be careful and to check in every 30 minutes like protocol required. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. Dale didn't check in. I tried raising him on the radio multiple times. Nothing. I checked his GPS tracker and saw that his truck had stopped moving. The last ping showed him about 7 miles up Route 14, right near an old church that had been abandoned for years. My first thought was maybe he'd gotten stuck or had mechanical trouble. It happens sometimes in storms this bad. I radioed Chuck, another driver who was working a route about 15 miles south, and asked him to swing by Dale's location to check on him. Chuck said he'd head that way and it would take him about 20 minutes. I sat there watching both GPS trackers move on my screen. Chuck's blip slowly made its way north while Dale's remained completely stationary. When Chuck finally got close to Dale's last known position, he radioed in. His voice sounded strange, kind of shaky. He said Dale's truck was there all right, sitting in the middle of the road with the plow blade down and the yellow light still flashing. The engine was running, but Dale wasn't in it. I asked Chuck to repeat that. He said the truck was empty. The driver's side door was wide open and snow was blowing into the cab. Dale's thermos was still sitting in the cup holder, steam coming off the coffee inside. His phone was on the seat, but Dale was nowhere to be seen. Chuck said he got out and looked around, calling Dale's name, but the wind was howling so loud he could barely hear himself. He didn't see any footprints in the snow either, which was weird, because fresh snow should have shown tracks. If Dale had walked away from the truck, I told Chuck to stay there and called the sheriff's department. They said they'd send a deputy out, but it might take a while given the conditions. While I was on the phone with the sheriff, Chuck came back on the radio. He sounded panicked now. He said he could hear something over the wind, a scraping sound, metal on pavement, like another plow blade dragging across the road. I told him to get back in his truck and wait for the deputy. Chuck said okay, but then he said something that made my blood run cold. He said the scraping sound was getting closer, but he couldn't see any headlights. Not in front of him, not behind him, nowhere. Then the radio went silent. I tried calling Chuck. Nothing. I looked at his GPS tracker and watched in horror as his signal stopped moving, just like Dale's had. Now I had 2 drivers not responding and 2 trucks sitting abandoned on Route 14. I immediately called the sheriff back and told them we had a serious situation. They said they were sending multiple units. About 45 minutes later, one of the deputies called me, Deputy Warren. He said they'd found both trucks, both empty, both with engines running and doors open. Chuck's truck was positioned about 100 yards behind Dale's. The deputy said there was something else, though. In the snow between the 2 trucks, there were marks, not footprints. These were different. They looked like something had been dragged through the snow, something big. The marks led off the road and into the woods near that old abandoned church. Deputy Warren said they were going to search the woods, but they needed to wait for daylight and for the storm to pass. It was too dangerous to go in there now. I spent the rest of my shift in a state of complete anxiety, watching the remaining GPS trackers, making sure none of the other drivers went anywhere near Route 14. I told them Dale and Chuck had mechanical issues, and that area was off limits until the storm passed. When my shift ended at 7 a.m., I couldn't go home. I drove out to Route 14 myself. The storm had finally stopped and the sun was coming up. There were cop cars everywhere, and search and rescue teams suiting up to go into the woods. I parked and walked over to where both trucks were still sitting. The scene was exactly like the deputy had described. Both trucks running, both empty, drag marks in the snow leading into the trees. One of the search and rescue guys came over and told me they'd found something in the woods. He looked pale. He said about 200 yards into the trees, they'd found Dale's jacket. It was torn to shreds. There was blood on it, fresh blood. But no sign of Dale. They kept searching, and about 50 yards further, they found Chuck's gloves, also covered in blood. Then they found Chuck's radio, smashed to pieces against a tree. But that's not what made them call off the search. They found something else. Tracks. Not human tracks, not animal tracks, something they couldn't identify. The tracks were huge, maybe twice the size of a man's boot, but the pattern was all wrong. And these tracks were leading deeper into the woods toward that old church. One of the searchers said the tracks were so deep in the snow that whatever made them had to weigh several hundred pounds. They brought in canine units. The dogs refused to follow the trail. All 3 dogs whined and pulled away, wouldn't go near where those tracks led. Eventually, the search and rescue team decided to check out the church itself. It was a creepy old place, built in the 1800s, been empty for decades. The windows were all boarded up and the front door was chained shut. Except when they got there, the chain was broken, snapped clean in half. The door was open. The sheriff and 3 deputies went inside with their guns drawn. I watched from the road, my heart pounding. They were in there for maybe 10 minutes before they came running out. And I mean, running. Deputy Warren was actually stumbling through the snow, trying to get away from that church as fast as possible. When they got back to the cars, Warren was shaking so badly he could barely hold his radio. He told everyone to get away from that church, to leave now. When the sheriff asked him what he saw, Warren just kept saying, "We need to burn that place down, we need to burn it to the ground." But he wouldn't say what was inside. The sheriff made them all get in their cars and they formed a perimeter around the church from a distance. They called in state police and the FBI. Nobody was allowed near that building. Over the next few hours, more agencies showed up. People in hazmat suits, people in military uniforms. They sealed off the entire area. We were all told to leave and not say a word about what happened. That was 3 weeks ago. Dale and Chuck were never found. Both were declared missing persons. The official story is they abandoned their trucks during the storm and got disoriented in the blizzard. But I know that's bullshit. I've talked to Deputy Warren since then, off the record. He won't tell me exactly what he saw in that church, but he did say one thing. He said, whatever was in there, it wasn't human. He said it looked like it had been living there for a very long time. He said it had collected things, pieces of things. And he said there were bones. A lot of bones. The old church was demolished 2 days after the incident. They brought in heavy equipment and tore it down to the foundation, then poured concrete over everything. The official reason given was structural instability and public safety concerns. But I've heard rumors from some of the construction workers who were there. They said when they were tearing down the walls, they found more of those massive tracks inside the building. They also found what looked like a nest of some kind in the basement, made from clothes and hair and other things they refused to describe. Here's the worst part. Last week we got hit with another big storm. Not as bad as that first one, but still pretty serious. All our plows were out again. Around 2 a.m., I got a strange call on the radio. It was scratchy and full of static, but I could make out a voice. It sounded like Dale. He was saying, "Help me," over and over. I tried to respond, but the signal cut out. Then an hour later, another call. This time it sounded like Chuck. Same thing, "Help me. Please help me." But when I checked the GPS system, all our trucks were accounted for and all the drivers responded when I did a roll call. Whatever I was hearing on that radio, it wasn't coming from any of our trucks last night. I was driving home after my shift. The sun was just starting to come up. I was on Route 14, about a mile south of where that old church used to be. That's when I saw it. A snowplow, sitting in the middle of the road with its lights flashing. For a second, my heart stopped, but as I got closer, I realized it was one of our trucks. The number on the door was 7. That was Dale's truck. The same truck that had been towed to the county garage weeks ago and had been sitting there ever since I slammed on my brakes and just sat there staring at it. The engine was running, the plow blade was down, and standing next to the driver's side door I could see a figure. It was tall, impossibly tall. And even from that distance, I could tell it wasn't shaped quite right. Too long in the arms, too wide in the shoulders. It was looking at me. I couldn't see a face, but I knew it was looking at me. Then it pointed down the road, toward where the church used to be, like it was inviting me to follow. I threw my car in reverse and got the hell out of there. When I looked in my rearview mirror, the snowplow was gone. I called the county garage as soon as I got home. They confirmed truck number 7 was still in the garage. Hasn't moved, hasn't been started. I don't know what I saw on that road. I don't know what happened to Dale and Chuck, but I know one thing for certain. Every winter, when the snow gets deep and the storms roll in, something comes out of those woods near where that old church stood. Something that's been there a lot longer than any of us. Something that knows these roads better than any human driver ever could. I put in my resignation yesterday. I'm done with night dispatch. I'm done with Route 14. I'm done with this entire county. My boss tried to talk me out of it, said I was one of his best people, said I was being irrational. But I told him the same thing Deputy Warren told me when I pressed him about what he saw in that church. Some things aren't meant to be found, and some roads aren't meant to be plowed. My name is Trevor. I'm 25 years old, and this happened last October when me and 3 of my college buddies decided to rent a cabin in the Adirondacks for a weekend getaway. We'd all graduated the year before and gotten jobs in different cities, so we figured it would be good to get together and do something like we used to back in school. None of us are really outdoorsy types, but the idea of a secluded cabin in the woods sounded perfect for just drinking, playing cards, and catching up. We found the place on one of those rental websites. It was cheap, like really cheap, which should have been our first red flag. The cabin was about 40 minutes from the nearest town, down a series of dirt roads that got progressively worse the deeper we went. The listing said it had been in the same family for generations and was recently renovated. But when we pulled up, it definitely didn't look renovated. It looked old, really old. The wood was dark and weathered, and some of the windows had that wavy glass that you only see in really ancient buildings. The owner wasn't there to meet us. Instead, there was a lockbox on the front door with a code we'd been given. We let ourselves in, and the inside was actually nicer than the outside suggested. It was small, just one main room with a kitchenette, a small bathroom, and a loft area with 4 beds. There was a wood-burning stove in the corner and shelves lined with old books and dusty knickknacks. The place smelled like pine and something else, something musty that I couldn't quite place. We settled in pretty quickly. My friend Jake started a fire in the stove while Chris and Derek unloaded the coolers from the car. I was putting our bags up in the loft when I noticed something odd. There were scratches on the inside of the front door, deep scratches, like someone had been clawing at it trying to get out. I pointed it out to the guys, and we all laughed it off, joking that maybe a bear had gotten stuck inside at some point that first night was actually pretty normal. We drank beer, played poker, told stories about our new jobs and the girls we were dating or trying to date. Around midnight, we heard some noises outside, rustling in the bushes, twigs snapping, that kind of thing. Derek went to the window and looked out but couldn't see anything. We figured it was just animals, deer or raccoons or whatever. Lives out there, we all crashed around 2 a.m. where I was up in the loft with Jake, while Chris and Derek took the 2 beds on the other side. I fell asleep pretty fast, despite the uncomfortable mattress and the occasional creaking sounds the cabin made as it settled. I woke up suddenly around 4 a.m. The cabin was freezing. The fire in the stove must have gone out. I was about to get up to restart it when I heard something that made me freeze. 3 loud knocks on the front door. Not aggressive pounding, just 3 deliberate knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I sat up and looked over at Jake. He was still asleep. I waited to see if anyone else had heard it. Nobody moved. I figured maybe I'd imagined it, or maybe it was a dream. I was about to lay back down when it happened again. 3 knocks, same rhythm, same volume. Knock, knock, knock. This time Jake woke up. He looked at me and whispered, "Did you hear that?" I nodded. We both looked down at Chris and Derek, but they were still out cold. Jake started to get up, probably to check who was at the door, but I grabbed his arm. Something about those knocks felt wrong. It was 4 a.m. We were in the middle of nowhere. Who would be knocking on our door? We waited in silence. A full minute passed, then another. Just when I thought maybe whoever it was had left, the knocking came again. Same pattern, 3 knocks, but this time it was louder, more insistent. Jake climbed down from the loft and went to the window near the door. He pulled back the curtain just a crack and looked out. After a few seconds, he turned to me and whispered, "There's nobody there." I climbed down to join him. We both looked out the window. The porch was empty. There was a motion sensor light above the door, and it was on, illuminating the entire front area. There was definitely nobody standing there. Chris woke up and asked what was going on. I told him someone was knocking on the door, but there's nobody outside. He rubbed his eyes and said we were probably hearing the cabin settling or a branch hitting the wall or something. We all went back to bed, but I had trouble falling asleep. I kept listening, waiting for the knocks to come again. They didn't. When I finally dozed off, the sun was starting to come up the next morning. We all felt pretty exhausted. Over coffee, we talked about the knocking. Derek insisted we'd imagined it, or that it was the wind or some other natural explanation. He suggested we spend the day hiking to shake off the weird vibes. We agreed and headed out around 10 a.m. We hiked for about 4 hours, found a pretty cool waterfall, took some pictures. It was actually a perfect fall day, crisp and sunny with the leaves in full color. By the time we got back to the cabin around 3 p.m., the strange events from the night before felt like a distant memory. That evening, we cooked burgers on the small grill outside and drank more beer. As it got dark, Chris suggested we build a bonfire in the clearing behind the cabin. We dragged some fallen logs into a circle and got a decent fire going. We sat around it for hours, just talking and joking around like old times. Around 11 p.m., Derek said he had to take a leak and walked off toward the tree line. A couple minutes later, we heard him yell, "Hey guys, come look at this." We all got up and walked over to where he was standing at the edge of the woods. He was shining his phone flashlight at something on the ground. Footprints. A lot of them. They were circling the cabin, going around and around. But here's what was weird about them. They all stopped at the front porch. There were dozens of prints approaching the door from every angle, but none of them led away. Jake said maybe they were our prints from earlier, but Derek pointed out that these were different, smaller, and they were fresh. The dirt around them was still loose. We followed the trail of prints as they went around the cabin multiple times, always ending at the front porch, never leading away. It was like someone had been walking circles around the cabin while we were out hiking, then vanished the moment they reached the front door. We went back to the fire, but the mood had definitely shifted. Nobody was joking anymore. Chris threw another log on the fire and said he wanted to head back inside. We all agreed. We let the fire die down and went into the cabin, making sure to lock the door behind us. It was only about midnight, too early to sleep, so we played cards and tried to act normal. But we were all on edge. Every little sound made us look up, the wind rattling the windows, a branch scraping the roof, the cabin creaking. At exactly 1 a.m., it started. 3 knocks on the front door. Knock, knock, knock. We all heard it this time. We all looked at each other. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. We waited. 30 seconds later, 3 more knocks. Same rhythm, same spots, like someone was using their knuckles in the exact same place on the door. Derek stood up and yelled, "Who's there?" No answer, just silence. Then, after another 30 seconds, 3 more knocks. Jake grabbed a flashlight and went to the window. He looked out for a long time before saying, "I can't see anyone. The porch is empty." But then he noticed something and his face went pale. He pointed at the door and said, "Look at the doorknob." We all moved closer to see what he was talking about. The doorknob was slowly turning, back and forth, like someone was testing it to see if it was locked. The door rattled slightly in its frame as whoever was out there tried to push it open. The scratches on the inside of the door suddenly made a lot more sense. Chris ran and grabbed one of the wooden chairs from the table and wedged it under the doorknob. We all backed away from the door and stood in the center of the room. The doorknob stopped moving. Everything went quiet. We stood there for what felt like an eternity, just staring at that door. Then the knocking started again, but this time it wasn't on the front door, it was on the back wall. 3 knocks. We spun around. Then, 3 knocks on the side wall. Then, 3 knocks on the other side. Whatever was out there was circling the cabin, knocking every few seconds. Always 3 knocks, Always the same rhythm. Derek pulled out his phone to call 911, but there was no signal. Of course there wasn't. We were in the middle of nowhere. The knocking continued, moving around the cabin again and again. It went on for 20 minutes. Then it stopped. We didn't sleep that night. We all sat in the middle of the room with the lights on, waiting for sunrise. Around 4 a.m., we heard something new. Not knocking this time. Scratching. Long, slow scratches against the outside walls, like fingernails dragging across the wood. The sound moved around the cabin just like the knocking had. When it got to the front door, the scratching became more aggressive, violent, like whatever was out there was trying to claw its way inside. Then it stopped. Complete silence. We waited. Nothing. As soon as the sun came up around 6 a.m., we threw all our stuff in the car and got the hell out of there. We didn't even bother cleaning up. We just wanted to leave. On the drive back, nobody said much. We were all exhausted and freaked out. When we got back to cell service, I checked my email and found a message from the rental company. It had been sent at 2 a.m. The subject line said, "Important property information." The email said there had been a mistake with our booking. The cabin we'd stayed in wasn't supposed to be available for rent. It had been taken off the listing months ago after previous guests reported disturbances. The email apologized and said we'd receive a full refund. It also included a warning. The warning said if we experienced any knocking or scratching sounds, we should leave immediately, and under no circumstances should we open the door or knock back. The last line of the email is what really got me. It said the previous owner of the cabin had been found dead inside 3 years ago. She'd been trying to claw her way out through the front door. The official cause of death was exposure and dehydration, but they never figured out why she didn't just open the door and leave. It was unlocked the whole time I tried to find more information about the cabin online, but the listing had been completely deleted. I called the rental company and the number was disconnected. I even tried to drive back there a few months later to see if I could find it again, but I couldn't remember which roads we'd taken. It was like the place had just vanished. I still have nightmares about those knocks. Always 3 of them. Always the same rhythm. And sometimes, late at night when I'm alone in my apartment, I hear 3 knocks on my door. I never answer. I never look through the peephole, because I know if I do, there won't be anybody there. Some doors aren't meant to be answered, and some knocks aren't really asking to come in. They're asking you to come out. My name is Ryan. I'm 31 years old and I grew up in northern Minnesota, right on the edge of Lake Superior. Ice fishing is pretty much a religion up there. Every winter, as soon as the ice gets thick enough, you'll see dozens of fishing shacks pop up across the lake like a little temporary town. My dad taught me how to ice fish when I was 7, and by the time I was in high school, I was spending most of my winter weekends out on the ice with my buddies. This happened 2 years ago during an especially cold February. I'm talking temperatures that didn't get above 0 for 3 straight weeks. The ice on the lake was over 2 feet thick, which is perfect for ice fishing, safe and solid. My friend Connor called me on a Friday afternoon and asked if I wanted to go out that night. He said the walleye were biting like crazy and we could have the spot to ourselves, since most people didn't like fishing at night when it was that cold. I agreed, and we made plans to meet at the boat launch around 8 p.m. I packed my gear, loaded my 4-wheeler, and headed out. When I got there, Connor was already waiting with his snowmobile. We both had our portable ice shanties strapped to our vehicles, basically just pop-up tents that you set over your fishing hole to keep the wind off you. We drove out about a mile onto the lake, far enough that we couldn't really see the lights from shore anymore. There were a few other shanties scattered around, maybe 5 or 6 of them, but they were all pretty spread out. Connor and I set up about 50 yards apart from each other. That's pretty normal. You want to be close enough to help each other out if needed, but far enough that you're not fishing the same water. I got my shanty set up, drilled my hole through the ice with my auger, and settled in. I had a little propane heater going, so inside the shanty was actually pretty comfortable. I dropped my line down and started fishing. For the first hour or so, everything was great. I caught 3 decent walleye and Connor radioed over that he'd caught 4. We were both in good spirits, joking around on the 2-way radios we always brought around 10 p.m. I started hearing something weird. It was faint at first, just barely audible over the wind. It sounded like someone yelling. I unzipped my shanty door and stepped outside to listen better. The sound was coming from somewhere out on the lake, but I couldn't tell which direction. It was just too dark and the wind was making it hard to pinpoint. I radioed Connor and asked if he could hear it. He said, "Yeah, sounds like someone's in trouble." We both got on our vehicles and started driving in the direction we thought the yelling was coming from. As we got closer, I realized it wasn't just yelling. It was screaming. Someone was screaming at the top of their lungs. We drove for maybe 5 minutes, weaving between some of the other shanties until we came to a spot where there was a single shanty sitting by itself, probably a quarter-mile from the nearest one. The screaming was definitely coming from inside that shanty. Connor and I pulled up next to it and I jumped off my four-wheeler. I called out and asked if everything was okay. The screaming stopped immediately. There was just silence. Connor came up beside me and we both stood there looking at the shanty. It was one of those older wooden ones, not the pop-up kind. It had a small door on one side with a little window. I knocked on the door and said, "Hey, we heard screaming. Is everyone all right in there?" No answer. I tried the door. It was unlocked, so I pulled it open. Inside, there was a man sitting on a bucket, hunched over his fishing hole. He didn't turn around when I opened the door. He just sat there, perfectly still, staring down at the hole in the ice. I said, "Excuse me, sir, are you okay?" He still didn't move. Connor came up behind me and shined his flashlight into the shanty. That's when we got a better look at the guy. He was wearing old fishing gear, like really old. The kind of stuff my grandpa used to wear. His jacket was this faded red and black plaid, and his hat was one of those ear flap ones made of wool. But what really stood out was how pale he looked. His skin was almost gray. Connor asked the man again if he was all right, and this time the guy slowly turned his head to look at us. His eyes were completely bloodshot, and his lips were blue. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something, but instead, he started screaming again. The same horrible scream we'd heard from across the ice. It was so loud and so sudden that both Connor and I jumped back. The man turned back to his fishing hole and went silent again. Connor grabbed my arm and said we need to call for help. This guy is having some kind of medical emergency. I agreed and pulled out my phone, but of course there was no signal out there. We'd have to drive back to shore to get help. I told the man we were going to get an ambulance and that he should come with us, but he didn't respond. He just kept staring at that hole in the ice. Connor and I ran back to our vehicles and started driving toward shore as fast as we could. It took us about 10 minutes to get back to the boat launch where we finally got cell service. Connor called 911 while I tried to give them our exact location. The dispatcher said they'd send emergency services out, but it would take at least 20 minutes for them to arrive. She asked us to go back and stay with the man until they got there. We didn't want to, but we knew we had to. We drove back out onto the ice, following our tracks back to where the shanty was. But when we got there, something was wrong. The shanty was gone. Not packed up, not moved, just gone. There was nothing there except a hole in the ice where the guy had been fishing. Connor and I got off our vehicles and walked over to the hole. We shined our flashlights down into it. The hole was completely frozen over. Not like it had just frozen in the last 20 minutes, but like it had been frozen for a long time. There was at least 3 or 4 inches of ice covering it. I looked at Connor and he looked at me. We both knew that wasn't possible. We'd been gone for maybe 30 minutes total. There's no way that hole could have frozen over that thick in that amount of time, especially with the heater that guy had running in his shanty. Connor radioed some of the other fishermen who were still out on the ice and asked if anyone had seen a red and black plaid shanty being moved. Nobody had. One guy said he'd been fishing in that general area all night and hadn't seen any shanty there at all. When we described the old wooden shanty to him, he got quiet for a minute. Then he said, "You guys need to get off the ice right now." He told us there was a story about that lake. Back in the 1950s, an ice fisherman went missing out there. They found his shanty a few days later, still set up on the ice with his gear inside, but the man was never found. The weird thing was there was a hole in the ice inside his shanty, but the hole had been scratched out from underneath, like something had broken through from below and dragged him down. Search teams dove down into the water for weeks but never recovered a body. According to the story, people started seeing the fisherman's shanty out on the ice over the years, always in different spots, always alone. And anyone who went inside would hear screaming, or sometimes they'd see the fisherman himself, still sitting there, still fishing. Some people said if you stayed too long, you'd feel something pulling at your legs from under the ice. Connor and I packed up our stuff immediately and drove back to shore. When the emergency services showed up, we told them what happened, but we left out the part about the shanty disappearing. We just said we must have gotten turned around and couldn't find the guy again. They did a sweep of the area with snowmobiles and didn't find anything. No shanty, no fisherman, no hole in the ice, except for the normal fishing holes everyone else had made. The next day, I did some research at the local library. I found an article from 1956 about a man named Harold Peterson who disappeared while ice fishing on Lake Superior. There was a photo with the article. He was wearing a red and black plaid jacket and a wool ear flap hat. It was the same man we saw in that shanty. The article said he was 43 years old when he vanished. If he were alive today, he'd be over 100 years old. I tried to put it out of my mind and move on, but things got weirder after that. About a week later, I was ice fishing during the day by myself in a completely different part of the lake. It was sunny and there were probably 20 other people within view. I was pulling up a fish when I heard it, that screaming, the exact same scream from that night. I looked around, but nobody else seemed to hear it. Everyone just kept fishing like nothing was happening. The screaming got louder, and I realized it was coming from under the ice, from directly below my shanty. I dropped my fishing rod and scrambled out of there as fast as I could. When I looked back at my shanty from about 20 feet away, I could see something dark moving under the ice beneath it, something big. The ice didn't break, but I could see the shadow moving around in circles under where I'd been sitting. I packed up my gear, drove off the lake, and I haven't been ice fishing since. Connor tried to convince me to go out with him a few more times, but I always made excuses. Eventually, he stopped asking. He still goes out there every winter, says he hasn't seen or heard anything unusual since that night. But he did tell me something interesting a few months ago. He said he was fishing with some guys from town, and they got to talking about weird experiences on the ice. One of the older guys, probably in his 60s, said when he was a teenager in the 1970s, he and his dad came across a shanty late at night with a man inside who was screaming. When they tried to help him, the man turned around and stared at them with bloodshot eyes. Then the screaming stopped. They left to get help, and when they came back, the shanty was gone. The man described it exactly like Connor and I had experienced. Red and black plaid jacket, wool hat, gray skin. That means this has been happening for at least 50 years, maybe longer. Every few years, someone goes out on that ice and runs into Harold Peterson, or whatever Harold Peterson has become. And I can't help but wonder what would have happened if Connor and I had stayed in that shanty longer. What if we'd stepped closer to that hole in the ice? What if we'd reached down into the water? I still live in the same town, and every winter when the ice gets thick enough, I see the shanties go up on the lake. I see people heading out there at night with their gear and their heaters, thinking they're going to catch some fish and have a good time. And I want to warn them. I want to tell them about Harold Peterson and his red and black plaid jacket. I want to tell them that if they hear screaming out there on the ice, they should turn around and leave. But I don't. Because who would believe me? I barely believe it myself. So I just watch from shore and hope that whatever is under that ice stays down there. Hope that Harold Peterson stays in his shanty, sitting on his bucket, staring at his hole in the ice. Because the alternative, the thought of him coming up through the ice and onto land, that's something I don't even want to consider. Last week I drove past the boat launch on my way home from work. It was late evening, just getting dark. I happened to glance out at the ice, and I saw it. A small wooden shanty, far out on the lake, all by itself. Red and black plaid tarp covering the roof. I pulled over and watched it for a few minutes. I could see a faint light inside, like someone had a lantern or a heater going. And then I heard it, even from that distance, even through my closed car windows. Screaming. I put my car in drive and went straight home. I haven't driven past that boat launch since. Some things are better left alone. Some fishermen should never be disturbed. My name is Emma. I'm 27 years old and I live in Wyoming, about 30 miles outside of Casper. I moved out here 3 years ago for work and I'm still getting used to how isolated everything is. Back east where I grew up, you're never more than 10 minutes from a gas station or a convenience store. Out here, you can drive for an hour and see nothing but empty highway and snow-covered fields. This happened last January during what the Weather Service called a historic blizzard. They'd been warning about it for days, telling everyone to stock up on supplies and stay off the roads. I work from home as a graphic designer, so I wasn't worried about getting stuck. I went to the store the day before it hit, bought enough food and water for a week, and settled in. The storm started around noon on a Tuesday. Within an hour, I couldn't see my car in the driveway. The wind was so strong it sounded like a freight train, and the snow was coming down so thick it looked like a white wall outside every window. I lost power around 3 p.m., which wasn't surprising. I have a generator that I keep in the garage for situations like this, so I bundled up, went out through the side door, and got it running. At least I'd have heat and could keep my phone charged. By evening, the storm had gotten worse. I'd lived through some bad winters, but this was something else. The snow was piling up against the windows, and I could feel the whole house shaking from the wind. I made myself dinner on my camping stove, tried to read a book by flashlight, and eventually decided to just go to bed early. There wasn't much else to do. I was in that half-asleep state, just starting to drift off, when I heard it. 3 loud knocks on my front door. I sat up immediately, my heart already racing. Nobody should be out in this storm. Nobody could be out in this storm. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. It was 11:47 p.m. I waited, listening. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it was just a branch hitting the house or something from the storm. Then it came again. 3 deliberate knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I got out of bed and walked to my bedroom door, which faces the hallway that leads to the front of the house. I called out, "Who's there?" No answer. Just the howling wind. I crept down the hallway, my phone flashlight cutting through the darkness. When I got to the living room, I could see the front door. I called out again. Still nothing. I went to the window next to the door and pulled back the curtain. The porch light was out because of the power outage, and all I could see was white. Snow everywhere. I couldn't make out any shapes or figures, but as I was looking, the knocking came again, so close it made me jump. Someone was definitely standing on my porch. Someone was definitely knocking. I pressed my face closer to the glass, trying to see who it was. That's when I saw movement, just a shadow, a dark shape standing near the door. I couldn't make out any details through the snow, but someone was there. My first thought was that it must be someone who got stranded in the storm. Maybe their car broke down or they got lost. But something felt wrong about it. The way they were just standing there, the way they'd knocked 3 times and then stopped, the way they weren't yelling or pounding on the door desperately like someone who needed help, what I called through the door. "Do you need help? Are you stranded?" No response. The shadow didn't move. I asked again, "Are you okay?" Nothing. I stood there for a full minute watching that dark shape through the window. It didn't move at all. It just stood there facing the door. My rational mind said I should open the door and help whoever was out there. But every instinct I had was screaming not to. I backed away from the window and went to my bedroom to get my phone. I tried calling 911, but I had no signal. The storm must have knocked out the cell towers. I was completely alone. I went back to the living room and looked out the window again. The shadow was still there, still, perfectly still. I watched it for another few minutes, and then it moved, not toward the door, but to the side. It was walking along my porch, slowly, toward the window I was looking through. I let the curtain drop and backed away. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I heard footsteps on the porch, heavy, deliberate footsteps. They walked past the window, past the door, and around the corner of the house. I ran to the side window in my living room that faces the driveway. I got there just in time to see the dark figure walking through the snow toward the back of my house. It was too dark and the snow was too thick to see any details, but I could tell it was definitely a person. Tall, wearing what looked like a heavy coat and a hood pulled up, I ran through my house turning on every battery-powered lantern and flashlight I had. I wanted light in every room. I checked every window, making sure they were all locked. I checked both doors. Everything was secure. I grabbed the baseball bat I keep in my bedroom closet and sat down on my couch, facing the front door. For the next hour, nothing happened. The wind howled, the house creaked, but there was no knocking, no footsteps. I was starting to think maybe whoever it was had left, had walked back to wherever they came from. But then I heard something that made my blood run cold. Someone was trying the back door. The doorknob was rattling. Someone was trying to turn it, testing if it was locked. I jumped up and ran to the kitchen, bat raised. Through the window in the back door, I could see that same dark shape. The figure was standing right there, their gloved hand on the doorknob. They tried it again, jiggling it more forcefully. I screamed at them. "The police are on their way. Get away from my house." The figure stopped moving. Through the window, I could barely make out what might have been a face under that hood, but I couldn't see any features. Just darkness. Then they knocked on the back door. 3 times, same rhythm as before. Knock, knock, knock. And then they walked away. I watched as they disappeared around the corner of the house. I ran back to the living room window just in time to see them walking back through the snow toward the front of the house. They were circling, just like they were checking every possible way to get inside. I don't know how long this went on. It felt like hours. The figure would appear at one window, stand there for a few minutes, then move to another window. Always silent except for those 3 knocks, always just standing and watching. I never got a good look at their face. The hood, the darkness, and the snow made it impossible. Around 3 a.m., I realized I hadn't heard anything for a while. No footsteps, no knocking. I carefully looked out each window, checking the entire perimeter of the house. I couldn't see anyone. They were gone. I sat back down on the couch, still holding the bat, too terrified to sleep. I stayed like that until the sun came up. When morning finally came, the storm had passed. The sky was clear and everything was covered in at least 3 feet of snow. I put on my boots and coat and went outside to look around. I had to see if there were footprints, if I could prove someone had actually been there. The snow around my house was completely undisturbed, not a single footprint anywhere. Not on the porch, not near any of the windows, not in the driveway, nothing. Just smooth, pristine snow everywhere. But I knew someone had been there. I'd seen them, I'd heard them. I hadn't imagined it. I went back inside and charged my phone. As soon as I had service, I called the sheriff's office. I told them everything that happened. The deputy who took my report was nice about it, but I could tell he didn't really believe me. He asked if I'd been drinking or if I'd taken any medication that might cause hallucinations. I told him no. He said they'd send someone out to check on me when the roads were clear, but it would probably be a day or 2. No one ever came. I called back 3 times and kept getting told they were still dealing with storm-related emergencies. Eventually, I gave up. I tried to tell myself, maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe the stress of the storm and being alone made me see things that weren't there. But I knew better. A week later, I was at the grocery store in town. I was in the checkout line when the woman in front of me was talking to the cashier about the storm. She mentioned that her neighbor, an older man who lived alone about 10 miles from town, had died during the blizzard. They found him 3 days after the storm when a relative came to check on him. He'd frozen to death. His house had lost power and he didn't have a generator. I asked where exactly he lived, and the woman gave me the name of the road. I knew that road. I drove past it every time I went to town. It was about 5 miles from my house. The woman said the weird thing was, when they found him, the back door to his house was wide open. They figured maybe he'd gotten confused from the cold and wandered outside, but his boots were still by the door. He'd gone out in just his socks. Something about that story bothered me. I went home and looked up the man's name in the local obituary section online. There was a photo. I stared at it for a long time. I couldn't be sure. The photo was an old one, and he was smiling in a well-lit room. But something about the shape of his face, the set of his shoulders, it could have been him. It could have been the figure on my porch. I started asking around town, carefully, trying not to sound crazy. I talked to people at the diner, the post office, the hardware store, and I found out something that made me sick to my stomach. Every major blizzard, going back decades, there were reports of a stranger knocking on doors during the storm. Always at night. Always 3 knocks. People would see a figure standing in the snow, but could never make out who it was. Most people didn't answer their doors, but a few did. And according to the stories, those people were never seen again. No bodies were ever found. Just houses standing empty with the front doors open, snow piling up inside. The locals chalked it up to people getting disoriented in the storm and wandering off into the cold. But I knew better. The next blizzard warning came 2 weeks ago. I packed a bag and drove to Casper to stay in a hotel. I'm not taking any chances. I've put my house up for sale. I can work from anywhere, and there's no reason I need to stay in this isolated place. My realtor asked me why I was selling. I told her I wanted to move somewhere warmer. I didn't tell her the real reason. I didn't tell her that sometimes, late at night, I still hear 3 knocks on my door. Even though I'm living on the 5th floor of an apartment building now. Even though there's no way anyone could be standing outside my door without being seen by security cameras. I hear those knocks. Knock, knock, knock. And when I look through the peephole, there's nobody there. Just an empty hallway and the feeling that something is waiting for me to open the door. Something that found me once in a blizzard and has been looking for me ever since. Something that knocks 3 times and never goes away. My name is Alex. I'm 29 years old and I live in Anchorage, Alaska. I've been an avid trail runner for about 5 years now, and I usually go out at least 4 times a week, even in the winter. People think I'm crazy for running in sub-zero temperatures, but once you get the right gear and know how to layer properly, it's actually pretty incredible. There's something peaceful about being the only person out on the trails when it's that cold. Most people stay inside, which means you have the whole wilderness to yourself. This happened 3 months ago in early December. It was a Saturday morning and I'd planned to do my usual 10-mile loop on the Eagle River Trail. The temperature was around -5 degrees, which is cold, but nothing I couldn't handle. I checked the weather forecast and there was no snow predicted, just clear skies and light wind. Perfect conditions. I started my run around 7 a.m., right as the sun was coming up. In December up here, we only get about 5.5 hours of daylight, so you have to time your runs carefully if you want to see where you're going. The trail was covered in packed snow and ice, so I was wearing my trail running shoes with the metal spikes on the bottom for traction. I had my headlamp on just in case, even though there was enough light to see the first 3 miles were great. I was in a good rhythm, my breathing was steady, and I was feeling strong. The trail follows the river for most of the way, and even though it was frozen solid, you could still hear water running underneath the ice in some spots. There were fresh animal tracks in the snow, moose probably, and maybe some fox. I'd seen both on this trail before. Around mile 4, I came around a bend in the trail and saw something up ahead that made me slow down. There was a person standing on the side of the trail about 50 yards in front of me. At first, I was just surprised to see anyone else out there that early and in that cold, but as I got closer, I started to notice things that seemed off. It was a girl, maybe in her late teens or early 20s. She was just standing there, facing the trail, not moving. She was wearing jeans and a light jacket. No hat, no gloves, no scarf. Her long, dark hair was hanging loose around her shoulders. I immediately knew something was wrong because there was no way she should be dressed like that in -5 degree weather. I slowed to a walk and called out to her. "Hey, are you okay?" She didn't respond. She didn't even look at me. She just stood there, perfectly still, staring straight ahead. I got closer, and that's when I really started to get concerned. Her skin was pale, like really pale, almost blue. And there was a frost on her eyelashes and in her hair. I walked right up to her and said, "Miss, are you all right? Do you need help?" She finally turned her head to look at me, and I felt my stomach drop. Her eyes were completely glazed over, like she was looking through me rather than at me. Her lips were blue and cracked. She opened her mouth like she was trying to say something, but no sound came out. Just a small puff of vapor. In the cold air, I pulled out my phone to call 911, but I had no signal. I'm not surprised since that part of the trail is pretty remote. I told the girl we needed to get her warm immediately. I started to take off my outer jacket to give to her, but when I stepped closer, she backed away from me. Her movements were stiff and jerky, like her joints weren't worked properly. I told her I was trying to help, but she just kept backing away. Then she turned and started walking down the trail, away from me. But she wasn't walking normally. Her gait was strange, like her legs were frozen stiff and she could barely bend her knees. I followed her, trying to get her to stop, trying to tell her we needed to go back to the trailhead where I could get cell service and call for help. But she ignored me and kept walking. I stayed about 10 feet behind her, watching her carefully. I didn't know if she was in shock or suffering from severe hypothermia or what. People do weird things when they're freezing to death. I'd read stories about hypothermia victims taking off their clothes or trying to burrow into small spaces. Maybe this was something like that. We walked like that for maybe half a mile. Her in front, moving in that stiff, unnatural way, and me following behind, trying to figure out what to do. That's when I noticed something that made my skin crawl. She wasn't leaving any footprints in the snow. I was leaving clear tracks with my spiked shoes. But where she walked, the snow was completely undisturbed. It was like she was floating just above the surface. I stopped walking. I just stood there, staring at the trail behind her. No footprints, none at all. She kept walking for a few more steps before she realized I'd stopped. Then she turned around to face me. We stood there looking at each other for what felt like forever. Her expression hadn't changed. Still that blank, glazed stare. I took a step backward. She took a step toward me. I took another step back. She matched it. My heart was racing now. This wasn't right. None of this was right. I turned around and started jogging back the way I'd come. I didn't look back for the first 100 yards or so, but when I finally did, she was following me. She was moving faster now, somehow keeping pace with my jog despite that stiff, jerky way she was walking. I picked up my speed to a full run. When I looked back again, she was running too. But it didn't look like running. It looked wrong. Her arms weren't pumping like a normal runner's would. They just hung at her sides. Her legs moved in that same stiff way, but impossibly fast. And she was gaining on me. I've never been so scared in my entire life. I was running as fast as I could on that icy trail, trying not to slip, trying not to fall, because I knew if I fell, she would catch me. I could hear her behind me. Not footsteps, because apparently she didn't make footsteps, but I could hear something, a kind of scraping sound, and breathing. Heavy, raspy breathing that sounded like it was coming from all around me. I ran for what felt like miles. My lungs were burning from the cold air. My legs were screaming. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Finally, I saw the trailhead parking lot up ahead. My car was the only vehicle there. I risked one more look back and saw that she'd stopped. She was standing in the middle of the trail, maybe 100 yards away, just watching me. I got to my car, fumbled with my keys, and threw myself inside. I locked the doors and started the engine. I sat there for a minute, trying to catch my breath, trying to process what had just happened. When I looked back at the trail, she was gone. I waited another 10 minutes before I got the courage to drive away. As soon as I got home, I called the Alaska State Troopers. I told them everything. About the girl in inadequate clothing, about her bizarre behavior, about how she seemed to be suffering from hypothermia. I didn't mention the part about the footprints or how she chased me. I figured they'd think I was crazy. They said they'd send a search and rescue team to check the trail. They called me back 3 hours later. They'd searched the entire Eagle River Trail and found nothing. No girl, no signs of anyone matching her description. They asked me if I was sure about what I saw. I said I was sure. I did some research over the next few days. I started looking into missing persons cases in the area, deaths on that trail, anything that might explain what I'd encountered. And I found something. Back in 2001, a 19-year-old girl named Sarah Mitchell went missing while hiking the Eagle River Trail. It was in late November, and she'd gone out alone in the afternoon. When she didn't come home that night, her parents reported her missing. Search teams looked for her for 2 weeks. They finally found her body about 5 miles down the trail. She'd apparently gotten turned around in an early winter storm, lost the trail, and died from exposure. The coroner estimated she'd been dead for at least 3 days before they found her. What struck me about the news articles was the description of what she was wearing: jeans and a light jacket, no hat or gloves. Her family said she'd only planned to be out for an hour and hadn't dressed appropriately for a longer hike. There was a photo in one of the articles. My blood went cold when I saw it. It was her, the same girl I'd seen on the trail, same long dark hair, same face. I stared at that photo for a long time, trying to convince myself it wasn't the same person. But it was. I'm sure of it. I haven't been back to that trail since. I've tried to tell myself it was hypothermia-induced hallucination or some kind of stress-related delusion, even though I felt fine before and after. I've tried to rationalize it in every possible way. But deep down, I know what I saw was real. Other runners have reached out to me since I posted about my experience on a local hiking forum. 3 different people have told me they've seen a girl matching Sarah's description on that same stretch of trail, always in the winter, always in the early morning. One guy said he tried to help her and she led him almost 2 miles off the trail before he realized something was wrong and ran back. Another woman said the girl followed her all the way to the parking lot and only disappeared when she got in her car. The strangest message I got was from a park ranger who works that area. He said unofficially they've had reports about the frozen girl on the Eagle River Trail for over 20 years, not just since Sarah Mitchell died, but before that too, way before. He said there are stories from the native Dena'ina people about a spirit that appears on that trail in winter, always looking lost, always trying to lead people deeper into the wilderness where they'll freeze to death just like she did. He told me something else that I can't stop thinking about. He said they found several bodies over the years in areas way off the trail. Hikers who seemingly wandered miles out of their way for no apparent reason. And every single one of them was found frozen to death wearing inadequate clothing in the middle of winter. Just like Sarah Mitchell, I've taken up running on a treadmill at the gym now. It's boring compared to trail running, but it's safe because I know now that there are some trails you shouldn't run alone. Some places where the cold doesn't just kill you. Sometimes it brings you back over and over again so you can share that death with others. Last week I drove past the Eagle River trailhead on my way to visit a friend. It was early morning, barely light out, and I saw someone standing at the entrance to the trail. A girl with long dark hair wearing jeans and a light jacket. She was facing the trail, perfectly still, waiting. I didn't slow down. I didn't stop. I just kept driving. But in my rearview mirror, I watched as another car pulled into the trailhead parking lot. I watched as a runner got out and started stretching, and I watched as that girl turned and started walking down the trail, glancing back once to make sure the runner was following. I should have stopped. I should have warned them. But I didn't, because some part of me knows that it wouldn't matter. She'll always be there on that trail, looking for company in her eternal winter. And someone will always follow.